This is our second virtual event from our Silicon Valley chapter of Women in Localization. We're really excited. The first virtual event went very well and we got a lot of feedback, so we're hoping the second one is even better. We're going to cover how the acceleration of digital transformation will impact localization today. A lot of Asians, but it will be really fun, and it's just so relevant with the time that's happening right now all over the world, so we're really excited. A couple of house rules. We had the call etiquettes showing up a little earlier today. If you just joined, please make sure you're muted. We all have experienced, how these events can be really distracting if, somebody's not muted. So double check your settings, please. Also, please use the chat feature to ask questions to our speaker, or if you have questions to our leadership team, we will definitely make sure to get back to you. And then lastly, remember that this event will be recorded. Thank you so much. I'll go ahead and start with the agenda. So what are we doing today? We are going to talk to you about women in localization a little bit, and then introduce today's event. And Winnie, one of our leadership team members, she will give an introduction to our keynote speakers and lead the panel discussion. And of course, we'll have Q&A from the audience. So we're looking forward to a lot of good questions, you guys. And then we'll wrap it up. All right. To start off, I want to talk about our Silicon Valley chapter a little bit. This is our membership, our leadership team. This picture was taken before shelter in place was put in place, many months before. We had a nice dinner. Kiara is working behind the curtains right now, making sure all the technical support is going smoothly. I work on the social media part, though this event, Kiara took on all of the work. And then Magdalena helps out with the membership, and Samantha helps out with the events organization. And Winnie, like I mentioned, she'll be taking care of the keynote speaker panel discussion, but she also manages the mentoring part of the event. So that's our team. We also have a Facebook. We really hope to increase our traffic on the Facebook page. Please join us, please like us, please follow us. And if you ever have any questions or any feedback that you want to give us, you can reach us at sv.chapter@womeninlocalization.com. Great. Next slide is our mission. This is actually my favorite part of the introduction because it really resonates with me on very numerous levels. To foster a global community for the advancement of women and localization industry. So our last event was focused on the community side of things, and I believe this event is going to focus on the advancement of women and the localization industry. Our mission is pretty strong. We want to support everyone, so please join our localization and organization, and we'll make sure that we carry out our mission. And a little bit more about the organization itself. So we are a certified nonprofit organization. We do have a website, www.womeninlocalization.com. I noticed someone was mentioning how to sign up to be a member. You can register at the website /sign up. We also have social handles, so please follow us for any updates or news. And speaking of how to register, who can join, men are definitely welcome. We are actually an inclusive organization that is supportive of anyone who's committed to supporting our mission and fostering a global community. So if you believe in our mission statement, please join us. You can use the link again or the QR code to join. And if you're still not convinced, there's many perks of being a member. This is my last slide about our organization, so stay with me. We have many benefits: access to gated content, publishing on our platform, discounts for our partners' events. There are many options: mentoring, volunteering, monthly newsletter. Not all of these, disclaimer, not all of these are 100% activated, but we're definitely working hard to get there. So please join us. And that was it for the introduction of the organization. Let's start with today's event. I was trying to think about a way to talk about today's event, but the slide itself is just perfectly explaining what's going to happen. So I'm going to go ahead and read the slide. So COVID-19 has had wide-reaching implications on every sector of the global economy. Predominantly, the shift to more virtual or remote engagements is leading to rapid increase in digital and multimedia content required much faster than ever before. In turn, the language services is exploring ways to better meet these demands, from resourcing to technical infrastructure. Our session today will highlight some of the ways in which globalization strategies are transforming as a result of our new normal, and how the localization industry is positioned to adapt and transform to support this evolution. I know it's very, very grand, but great times, great responsibilities needs, great measures. So I'm really excited to hand it over to Winnie now to introduce our keynote speakers and start the panel discussion.
Thank you, Laura. Hello, Renato. Hello, Natalie. What a treat to chat with you today. As a starting point, could you please tell us a little bit about yourselves? We start with you, Natalie.
Sure. Hi, everyone. It's great to be here with Women in Localization. Thank you for hosting us today. I'm Natalie. I work at Hubspot, running localization. I've worked in the localization space since 1996, back when I worked with Winnie at Language Line, and also worked with Renato at Common Sense Advisory. So I've been in this space for quite a while, and very happy to be here and share whatever I can.
Thank you. Renato, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm the CEO of Nimdzi, a market research company here in Seattle. Here in Seattle, it's ridiculous to talk about place these days. We're actually in 9 countries with a very distributed team. I've been in the industry when it wasn't an industry, because I started working with translation in 1983. There were no computers. It was before the word localization even existed. A quick anecdote, the first time I heard the word localization was a company from Ireland called the Brazilian Association of Translators, and asked what was the biggest translation company in Rio de Janeiro. And the secretary of the association says, "Oh, we don't promote translation companies here. This is an association of professional translators." So the next day, his wife called and asked, "Oh, is there any translator in your association that likes computers?" They said, "Oh, Renato Beninatto." So they called me and they asked, "Renato, do you do localization?" I said, "Of course we do localization." And I turned to my wife and said, "What the hell is localization? I don't care, we'll do it." And this is how I started in the localization industry. I didn't even know what it was. But anyway, I've been a long time, and I think that my biggest credit in my career is being a friend of Natalie.
So sweet.
Yeah, so as you can see, for our audience, we've come a long way, and both Natalie and Renato have a lot of experience in the industry, from the buyer side, from the supplier side, right, for the whole industry. So today we're talking about how the lockdown due to COVID-19 has accelerated digital transformation, and how that digital transformation has impacted localization. So we'll start with the definition. What is your definition of digital transformation? We'll start with you, Renato.
Okay, digital transformation is it's on the eye of the beholder, right? It's essentially whatever you did manually, whatever process, task, it has to do essentially, the biggest transformation that is happening today, I think, is from a cultural perspective more than anything else. So what COVID has done is that it has accelerated the need for companies to be able to execute whatever they do online without brick and mortar. And the fact that we're having this conversation here is a proof of the success of digital transformation in the meeting space, in the event space. So digital transformation is essentially converting a business to run as much as possible in digital format.
Natalie, how are you? Anything you want to add?
Yeah, I agree completely with what Renato said. I would maybe add that I think about it in terms of like solving problems. So maybe solving business problems digitally versus offline or manually or non-digital. It's hard. This is one of these terms that it's hard to define without using the term. So digital transformation is like, how do you define it without saying digital? But I think, Renato's right in line there. I will say I agree that a lot of the transformation we're seeing in the localization space is less about like, how do we work across borders and how do we work remotely and stuff like that. We've been doing that for many years. I think what's kind of interesting is how many other people are doing it now, and that has changed how we work, and also just like keeping the human aspect in all of this, because that's what I think people are finding the hardest is the cultural shift and the interpersonal, like how do you keep all of that going in a business environment when you can't go face to face and meet somebody and you can't travel, and especially in our industry where we do tend to travel quite a bit. So yeah, I think that's a little bit off topic, Winnie, sorry, but
yeah. So Nataly, you mentioned that it's interesting, we've been doing this for a long time, but it's interesting to see how many more people are doing this, right? So it sounds to me that digital transformation used to be on the back burner for some companies, especially the companies that are used to doing business face-to-face, right? But now they're being compelled to have to do this. Now, in your observation of so many more people doing this, anything surprised you? Anything new that surprised you?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of would break it down, and I'd be curious to see what Renato thinks about this as well. I would kind of break down like two areas. One is like remote work, and like everybody is now shifting to this, remote work, which I think that's what we've had a lot of experience with, and also delivering services and delivering, what you sell digitally. So on the remote work side, I think, as many more people are trying to figure out how to work remotely, it's like, what does work-life balance even look like? I used to have people who always were 9 to 5 people, and I could expect, okay, they're offline for the day, next time zone, please. I could kind of shift my day along. And now it's not like that, because people are actually behaving more like me. They're very time zone agnostic, like they'll kind of just shift and work wherever makes sense for them. So that's kind of a shift on the remote work front. But in terms of the business and delivering services and products digitally, I think that's been a real shift. At HubSpot, we offer software that helps people with that digital transformation. So for us, we've seen a huge uptick in companies that are kind of almost forced to build a website, have email marketing, and things like that. But while we used to try to encourage that shift, now it's almost like we have to throttle and modulate a little more, because everybody's overwhelmed with the amount of communication. I'm sure all of you, as soon as this started happening, I would get emails from random companies saying, here's our COVID plan. Like, I don't care if I just buy socks from you like once a year, what your COVID plan is. Like, I never am in touch with you at all. Like, I don't need to know that. But everyone was starting to send out these blasts because it became almost like a trend in marketing. So I feel like that's where we, as kind of enablers of digital transformation, have to basically say, okay, are we doing too much? Like, there is such a thing as too much too soon. So like, how do we make that transition gracefully? Like, how do we make it happen in a way that is palatable and right for the end customer? So that's, I feel like a lot of the COVID shifts have kind of exacerbated extremes. It's like extremes in things like, extreme adoption of video conferencing technology, extreme adoption of remote work. So a lot of this has kind of led to like some people working a lot and other people losing their jobs, and surges in some industries and declines in others. So it's interesting to see all these shifts.
Yeah, it's very interesting because we, as an industry, we're an industry of enablers, and you used exactly the word that I was going to use. HubSpot is one of those. Many of the companies where the participants work are enablers of that environment, but we're an industry that doesn't see crisis. We're impervious to crisis. We're always growing because of number of languages that are added, new platforms that come up all the time. We have a quote that I heard in the 2008 crisis: when the economy is good, we translate contracts; when the economy is bad, we translate lawsuits. So we work on both sides. But what I've been seeing here, especially on our consulting work, There are some industries that are not there yet, right? A very good example is the healthcare industry that is not, because it is a regulated industry, it's an industry that still uses fax machines. I don't know if they use fax machines. They send information via fax. It might be an electronic document, but still they use the fax because it's written in the law that was very advanced, maybe in 1985 when it was written, that a safe way to send information instead of using the mail, a fast way was to use the fax machine. So digital transformation has a completely different meaning for that type of organization that has constraints around that. Another environment, and this is the beautiful thing because localization helps that. And when we talk about localization and the language enablement, we're not only talking about international business, but especially in the United States, working with limited English proficiency, people in the market. So healthcare is one of the examples like that. But you see, what COVID has enabled is the explosion of e-commerce. And then you think e-commerce, it's a digitally transformed. It's already the epitome of digital transformation. You buy whatever, you buy toilet paper online on Amazon, right? However, that affects a whole supply chain that was not necessarily automated in their processes. So digital automation affects the way you buy, the way you transport, the way you store, the way you deliver in the last mile, and all these elements. So this affects a company like Tableau that is enabling mapping, not mapping, reporting solutions, analyticals, and things like that. It affects a mapping organization that is developing routes for logistics. So once you start in this space, there is this knockdown effect that disseminates across all elements of the business. And this is the importance of digital transformation, is the fact that it, once you start, everybody who's on your supply chain needs to adapt to that new reality. The good thing about internationalization, localization, is that has been the nature of the business. We were digitally transformed in the 1990s when the internet came to our industry, and we went from being a local business where you found the translator that you were going to use on the yellow pages to one where today it's something that we take for granted, is that you should use native speakers in country for doing translation. This wasn't possible 25 years ago. It wasn't. There were no means to do that in a scalable way. So we were digitally transformed a long time ago. So this conversation is interesting because it's natural to, like you said, Nataly, the distributed working, remote working. The only thing now is that people need to put makeup and look good and take care of their background, because before we did this without the video.
No, Renato, you made a good point, right? Our industry essentially has gone through our digital transformation, at least the last round. We're going to have to continuously do this, right? But Nataly said, she has observed that the new world we're living in has compelled some companies to now, for example, build a website and do email marketing that they never had to worry about, right? So when I heard that, I thought, that's great. That means growth for our industry, right? Mm-hmm. So Renato, are you seeing that? Are you seeing growth for our industry?
Oh, always. This is an industry that it was very funny. I'll tell a little anecdote with Don De Palma, our common friend. Me, Nataly, and Don used to work together at Common Sense Advisory. And I had a conversation with him in 2008 when we had the financial crisis. And he said, we need to make an announcement. We need to tell everybody that there's going to be a recession and people need to be prepared for the recession. And I said, no, we don't have recession in the industry. I've never seen a recession in this industry. And he kept insisting. So we challenged each other and we started calling companies to see how they were reacting to that. And this is when I heard from CLS, a company that is part of Lionbridge now, that they weren't afraid. The financial crisis was going to be a boon for them because from contracts they were going to translate lawsuits, and lawsuits are bigger than contracts. So growth is not a problem in our industry. And in the beginning, there is uncertainty. That's very different. And I started tracking it. If you see the metrics from Gala, from Common Sense Advisory, from Slater, all these organizations that are following in a methodical way what is going on in the industry are reporting that maybe 30% of the companies are seeing a decrease. They might be involved in a segment that was heavily affected. They were doing on-site interpretation or things like that. But you have like 10 or 12% of the companies that are experiencing explosive growth. You have about another 20% of the companies that are growing. But the vast majority of the companies are business as usual. The adaptation period was very quick. I talked to the top 10 LSPs around May, June, and they kept saying, oh, we thought that February, we prepared a contingency plan in February, and then nothing happened. And then March, best month of ever, best quarter ever, SDL, Lionbridge. The only company of the big ones that had an impact was the Big Word, because they have a big interpretation element in there. But I've never seen a crisis in this industry. I was in Canada at a conference, and I started saying, remember that time when people were being fired, lots of unemployed people in the industry, it was horrible. And I see these blank faces in the room. And of course you don't remember, it never happened. We haven't had this reality in our space. And so I'm very confident with what is going on in the future. It's different inside, if you're on the buyer side, if you are in an organization that Airbnb had to let go a bunch of people, Expedia had to let go a bunch of people in the localization. But then you go to Netflix and they're hiring, and you go to Hubspot and they're hiring, right?
Yeah.
Right, Nataly? It's a pattern.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, the buy-side organizations that are hardest hit, much like the LSPs, it's because of their exposure to different verticals or different segments. And that is all something that like is going to be more of like a, depends if they're like 100% exposed to the travel industry or, hospitality and that, but a lot of those businesses are also, coming back, like especially with restaurants and things like that. Like they're figuring out like different delivery models and how can they repurpose and retool and be flexible. And I think that's where we're seeing, at least my experience from the buyer side of this is, we didn't decrease the amount of work that we were sending to our localization vendors, but what we had to do was dramatically change things very quickly and pivot and adapt. And so like, let's say, if a certain percentage of our localization budget was being spent on generating demand and marketing campaigns, well, when we realized everybody was being flooded with marketing campaigns, we were like, oh, let's do something different. We don't want to contribute to the madness. Let's dial back and let's, do some research on how COVID is impacting growth at, our 70,000 customers. We released a research study on that. And we're tracking that, by the way, every month we're releasing new data on COVID and how it's affecting sales and marketing activities. We also pivoted more toward like, how can we support our customers? Like, because even though we're not exposed to any one vertical really, we do have customers in some of those markets where, we knew that they would be more adversely affected, especially small and medium-sized businesses. So that's another thing that I think is interesting is, a lot of the small and medium-sized businesses haven't traditionally invested in localization as much as the enterprise. And now with more of those small and medium-sized businesses moving to online models and digital models, I think we're going to see a bigger growth of that segment in localization, because I'm seeing it even at HubSpot. A lot of our customers are adding languages in our software. We can see when they're creating content in new languages, or they're adding languages on their websites that they're building with our software. So we do see that that's increasing. So I think that's pretty promising for the localization industry.
That's a great point. So I think for those who are new to the industry and you're looking for career opportunities, perhaps think about medium to small size companies. You know, we used to perhaps focus a lot on the big companies, but now we have more players coming into the industry that creates more diversity for career opportunities. That's wonderful, right? And you both use the term buyer and seller side, right? And Renato, you made my day. You say growth isn't a problem for our industry. That made my day. But at the same time, we also know that change is the name of the game, right? It doesn't mean, even though we're growing, it doesn't mean the LSPs can just sit back and count their money, right? They have had to change because Nataly, as you alluded to that, you have changed, right? So from what you have seen, tell us a bit about what you are seeing, how LSPs are having to adapt to this new reality.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that's a very, very good point, Winnie. The thing is, there is a third player in this equation, which is technology companies, right? So you have buyers, sellers, and technology companies. Some LSPs will have their own technology, but they still play a role in this space. So you need to look at this from a macro perspective. From a macro perspective, and we can tell anecdotes and think about problems here and there and difficulties here and there. But from a macro perspective, what is happening is the trends that you see, and they have been and they're going to continue to be the same. Content is growing at a faster rate than the supply is generating. So content, put a number, grows by 30%, 100%, 500%, it doesn't matter. It grows more than the number of translators that come into the market every year, which grow at, let's say, a little bit over population growth, which is in the Western countries, in some cases in Japan, negative growth, right? So you have a decrease. So when you have more demand, more content, less supply, you need to increase automation. And this is where, these are the dynamics that change over time. When LSPs tend to think about their business as language, quality, and price. These are not important things for the buyers. These are, price is negotiable, quality is the level that if you don't provide quality, you're not even in the market. The market takes you out. What really matters is the quality of your service and your on-time delivery, your reliability. If you focus on those things, on-time delivery, flexibility to change, being ready to adapt to what we talked in the beginning, this digital transformation that the client's going through. I mean, if you look, I'm looking at Magdalena here. I've known High Tech Passport for at least 20 years. I mean, we worked in Ventura Publisher. Oh my God, right? PageMaker. And today we're working on Illustrator, Figma. Collaboration is a big thing that wasn't, we wanted to have collaboration. I worked on a project for SAP with, we had to do 1,500,000 words. I needed 70 translators in the same office. You don't think about that today. So these are the changes. The changes that happen are how we adapt to these organizational changes. But keep in mind the trend, and I'm talking at a macro level, because if you're a Spanish translator, if you're a Chinese translator, you're going to say, Renato, you're full of shit. Because there's a lot of competition, right? But growth, I don't know, Turkish is a language. I cannot say, oh, go learn Turkish, but Japanese, Norwegian, Scandinavian languages, Indonesian is a language that is growing significantly because it's the biggest market in Southeast Asia to 300 million inhabitants, right? Yeah. Incredible growth opportunity. And so when I talk about a macro level, I'm talking about these trends. And that is the way that the buyer looks at things. They look at, I have a delivery schedule. We're talking now about continuous localization. Do you have a process that can take content constantly, churn it, and send it back to me within my Scrum, within my process, and let's keep going. And this is where flexibility, understanding the buyer need becomes the value. And it's not the quality of the translation, it's not the price of the translation. You're going to figure out those are your internal processes. If you don't deliver, if you deliver crap, the client is going to go away and find another vendor. That's simple. If you're the quality, if you don't answer, if you promise you're going to deliver on Wednesday and you deliver on Friday and you don't let the client know ahead of time so that they prepare, you're not going to get the next project. That's essentially where the challenges are for LSPs, is understanding, maturing. And this is why you have so much consolidation, because the large buyers are buying from the large players because they understand business, not because they understand language.
Mm-hmm. So Nataly, you're on the buyer side. What are you seeing in terms of how LSPs have had to adapt?
Yeah, I mean, I can only speak to the LSPs that we work with in our situation, and a few, things that I've heard from other buyers in calls since COVID started. But I know that what Renato mentions is true. The agility and the relationship side is more important to us. And I would say, when I say agility, I mean both speed and adaptability. And it's more about adaptability than speed, I would say, because it's really about it's almost about preparedness and being able to tap into the right resources at the right time in the right capacity. One of the things that we've been working on just in general, even before COVID, was to ensure that our vendors had enough capacity so that when we do see spikes and surges, that they can actually handle the volumes. And of course, anybody can find a translator, for a language. And that's why I laugh. I get so many cold emails every day of people, reaching out and saying, hey, we offer the best quality in 200 languages, the best price. And I'm like, who do you think you're reaching out to? Like, number one, we don't need 200 languages. We need the languages that we have and maybe a few next level ones. And price is not our main focus. Speed and adaptability are. And so I think some of the changes we've seen due to COVID are just an increased need to pivot quickly. So we might plan something and then decide, you know what, we're not going to do that launch after all. Now the timing isn't right. Maybe these markets need a little bit of a break. We're going to launch that instead the following quarter. That kind of thing. The other thing that is just a general trend, but I believe is exacerbated with the pandemic, is, as Renato mentioned, more and more companies are doing continuous development. So continuous release on the product localization side. But what does that mean for marketing? Marketing has the accompanying campaigns and the accompanying product launches and the accompanying blog posts and emails and all of that content that's also transforming into more of a continuous service. So one thing I've written about and have been talking about a lot, actually for many years, and no one wants to listen, but I'm telling every LSP out there, this is a good idea if somebody will just do it, is we need a retainer model where a client can basically book a block of time that's guaranteed for them, whether they use it or not, almost like a cell phone plan used to be, where you had like X number of minutes that you could guarantee you have access to. Because for me, and for a lot of buyers that I've spoken with, we would pay a premium for that guaranteed availability. What we don't want is the minute we have a need to be told, oh, all the translators that normally work on your account are booked up with this other project and blah, blah, blah. We don't want any of that. We don't have time for that. But what we would pay for is guaranteed availability. So I've suggested a retainer model. I've suggested other things. What will happen if that doesn't become an offering that's kind of like a standard offering in this industry is that more and more buyers are going to hire translators themselves, and they will hire the linguists internally. If they have a guaranteed amount of work that's coming through steadily, which with continuous delivery, continuous marketing, content marketing, recurring traffic, you have to have recurring content, and you have to have a steady, continuous pace. going to see more and more of that happening. I've seen it in various different companies. We hired internal linguists, and we still depend a lot on LSPs, but other companies are doing that as well. And the reason is because the LSPs can't keep up. Like if I could have found, back when I first started at HubSpot, an LSP that could fully support all of my needs with that capacity and that level of quality, of course I would have outsourced everything. But it just wasn't possible. Most LSPs are not, don't have the business model set up that way. They want price per word. And that isn't how I want to pay. That is not what I care about. I don't care about the individual word. That isn't where I get my value. It's fine to use that to measure throughput or to measure other things. But as for pricing, I believe that is the wrong pricing model. And I believe with the pandemic, more and more people are realizing as they go digital and they move into, online models, that if they want to have a strong business, they're going to need recurring traffic, recurring emails, recurring campaigns, and that's going to lead to more and more people needing that type of offering. So that's just my that's my pet.
So the LSPs that are listening, please take note of the business model that Nataly is talking about. So from that, I want to take us to a discussion about budget. Okay, before we start taking questions from the audience. What's happening this year? Basically, the budget has already been set late last year, but you are. I think you're going to start going into the budgeting process for next year, right? Okay. So, Nataly, from a buyer's perspective, what are you seeing in terms of what's going to happen from a budget perspective, which is going to impact the LSPs that are listening to this call?
Yeah. So if I were at an LSP right now, one thing I would be looking at and talking with my buyers about is their plans for the following year. So what are they planning in terms of growth? Are they trying to reduce costs in some areas? And I would get specific about like which areas are you trying to grow in? Which areas are you trying to invest in? Because those are the things as an LSP I would want to be aligned with. Like if they're going to invest in, say, they might say, oh, you know what, we're not launching any new products next year because we've defunded product development for the next 12 months. What we're going to do is make sure we try to retain our existing customers. Then if I were the LSP, I'd be taking a close look at their customer-facing materials, their support content, things like that to see, maybe I can help you with automating and doing some more with machine translation on some of that content that's long tail. Maybe we can come up with an offering for you there. Try to anticipate their needs based on what they're talking about. And, another tip is listen to the earnings calls. If it's a public company, like listen to their performance, their financial performance, and what trends the CEO is talking about to investors. If you're noticing like, hey, their European growth is really off the charts, chances are they're going to keep investing in those European languages. If you're noticing, oh, LATAM has taken a dip or Brazil has taken a dip, maybe that's not where they're going to invest next year for the time being. Maybe that'll be a couple of years out when those economies, So, try to understand where their head is at, where the CEO's head is at, and that will help you understand what the priorities are. Because most of us working on the buy side don't have the chance to kind of write up a summary of the earnings call and send it to our vendors. Like nobody has time for that.
But Nataly, the point that you're bringing is so important because you are aware of that. You have a unique position because you localize product, the HubSpot software, and you localize content, which is your marketing material and so on. So in many organizations, these functions are separate. And the other thing is that localization is down in the organization, so they don't get that message that happens at the very high level. You happen to report inside the C-suite of the organization. So this is a good tip, not only for the LSPs, but also for the localization managers to listen. I don't listen to the earning calls, I don't have the time, but I read the 10Qs and the 10Ks. So public companies have to file a quarterly earnings report and an annual earnings report. And there's always a few pages in the beginning, which is the commentary or the CEO's message to the shareholders. And that is the unfiltered strategy that you're going to get from the company. And sometimes the way that you help your clients internally is telling them, hey, the CEO of your company said that growing internationally is a priority. So be prepared and ask for more money when your boss comes to ask you to cut your budget by 10%. Why, if we need to expand internationally, we need to spend more, right? So, and on the budget season, another important strategy is to keep in mind that growth is not only even though people might be cutting budgets in line items, they might be adding line items. So there might be other services that you can provide along with the services that you already do. So it's not only localization, but maybe there is some kind of testing and so on. And the final tip that I would have in this area is that usually what we are seeing is happening, pre-sales content is going to have no impact. Marketing, sales, website, that stuff that is client-facing before the sale is closed, customer relationships upfront, those are intact. The area where there's going to be cuts are probably going to be product-related and support-related content, because this is after sales. After sales, the client is in, who cares?
Yeah, I would say, so I agree with that for most companies. I would say the only caveat I would give is it's like if Renato's point is 0.1 minus like 0.1a/1 Roman numeral 1. If it's a SaaS company, it would be the exact opposite, because SaaS companies live or die by retention. So SaaS companies, you'll see the opposite. So if you're working for a company that has a subscription model and they rely on recurring revenue to be retained, then all their efforts will probably shift to making their product better and their customer impact versus marketing, though that's where they're probably cut. Renato's exactly right. If it's not a SaaS company and they rely on net new sales for growth, they're going to be focused on marketing and sales content to generate leads and make sure they can continue keeping their business growing. Look at their business model for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're making generalizations, but take the average and you're going to get there.
Yeah. So I want to make sure we have a chance to and for you to answer our audience questions. I wanted to check in with my colleagues. Kiara, do we have any questions that you wanted to raise?
We don't have any main questions, but we do have a few comments. I thought I would read a comment from Jan that he mentioned this is a great discussion, and he agrees on some of the last points you guys made on how it's still tricky to find and establish the retainer and quote without prior experience. But once you have a history about workload, it is feasible and desirable for real teamwork between buyers, LSPs, and contributors, including translators, LQA testers, etc. So this gains time to concentrate on improvements and actual work. Do you guys have any comments around that?
The comment that I would make about this is that there are some companies that are focusing on that model. I saw that Samantha from Lilt is here, is pivoting into that model. You have translated.com, now it used to be translated.net in Italy, has a similar model that they're using with Airbnb. You have a few companies that, SDL launched their Slate platform, which is essentially subscription-based, retainer-based kind of thing. So there are, and there is another one has been doing this longer, but it's more focused on machine translation. It's a paraphrase. So there are attempts. There is some experience in the market. There are companies that are trying to take that approach. It needs a mature customer like Nataly to be able to understand, because the challenge is that we have been talking about per word price forever in the industry. I joke, but it's absolutely true. The first time that I heard that we needed to abandon per word price and move to another price was in 1992. And it was a guy, I forgot his name, unfortunately, who was the localization manager for Netscape. Some of you were born after Netscape disappeared, but Netscape was the first browser in the industry, and the guys say, oh, we need to move out of per word pricing, and there are modest attempts here, but the problem is not the LSP. It tends to be the buyer not having the maturity to understand it. So you are in a unique position, and there are a few, very few, that are in that position. But I would say that the message here is having the flexibility, which is what we were talking about before.
Yeah.
How about you, Natalie? Comment?
Yeah, I would agree with everything Renato said. I would also add, in terms of the buyers not having the maturity, I think part of it can be solved by technology vendors. You know, there are some interesting technology companies that are starting to use more automation to like take a look at like how much net new content has been added in different languages on these websites, and you know, through smart tools can actually help those buyers get a sense of their own capacity, because as Renato mentioned, a lot of companies don't have centralized localization. So I'm fortunate that at HubSpot, I know exactly how much is happening in every department, and we serve, you know, about 9 different stakeholder groups throughout the company, none of which are more than like 30%. So, you know, of our total volumes. I'm lucky to have that data, and I think sometimes I probably take it for granted. But wouldn't it be great if more LSPs could help get that data? Because a lot of it is off public information. It's like, you know, how many, you know, software strings, and, you know, how much content has been added, and how much on websites and web pages and blog posts and stuff like that. So even an approximation would be helpful for those people running localization at buy-side companies.
Mm-hmm. So Kiara, I think I saw a few questions coming in. Oh, Kiara, we cannot hear you.
I think we can take the question from Michelle. She asked if you guys have any thoughts about how individual translators can take advantage of the trends that you have mentioned during our conversation.
I have a thought on that. I don't know, Renato, you wanna?
No, you first.
So I think it's important for translators to establish an area of expertise that they feel really passionate about and make a name for themselves that way. You know, some of the individual translators that have come across my radar are because they've been blogging or, you know, writing different things, presenting on topics that actually matter to us. I recently interviewed a Polish translator who was writing about Black Lives Matter and the impact on Polish translation and inclusive translation. And I thought, wow, you know, that's the type of translator that I want to work with, because I can be guaranteed that she's thinking about this, you know. And so if we do Polish someday, I'm going to ask the LSPs that we work with to call her up, because I would like to have her working on our account. So, you know, I won't say that every buyer is like reading translator blogs and watching translators on Twitter maybe as much as I do, but I do think having a niche, it's not that you necessarily need to work just in that niche, but having an area that you feel passionate about can put you on the radar and help you stand out a little from the rest of the crowd.
Yeah, I would say that the two main things is it's to be discoverable first, right? So you need to learn a little basic of marketing to be discoverable. If people can find you, you're not going to get any work. And this is what, and the other element is to be relevant in the way that you position yourself. Appear as an expert. The thing about what it's the whole story about the bear, right? The two guys that are in the forest and they see a bear, and one of them starts taking his shoes, and the other one says, "Why are you taking your shoes off? You're not going to outrun the bear." And the other one says, "I don't need to outrun the bear. I need to outrun you." So you don't need to be the best translator. You just need to be better than the ones that are directly competing with you. So incrementally, there are lots of resources in the industry for you to become a better communicator, a better salesperson. You need one of the things that, if you ask me, going back to the beginning of the career, what would you wish you have known in the beginning? That if you don't sell, it was something that was on the desk of my first boss. If you don't sell, a terrible thing happens. And you needed to get really close to be able to read in very small print, nothing. So nothing happens if you don't sell. So learn how to sell your service, know how to use the platforms that are available today, and understand that your buyer, if you're working for LSPs, is going to be a vendor manager or a project manager, and understand what are their needs. If you're selling to final clients, the conversation that we had before, understanding what the client wants to accomplish with the translation, who is going to read your document, how it's going to be disseminated, published, shared, and so on. Once you understand what is the relevance of your business, I was talking recently to patent translators. Their clients are not necessarily the inventors nor the big companies that file patents. They're lawyers. So the challenge for a patent translator is not only understanding chemistry or mechanics or whatever they're translating, but also what a lawyer needs. Why do they need the translation by a certain period? What is the format? And what they're going to do after that. So be discoverable, be relevant in the content that you share. That would be my recommendation.
Can I add two things to that?
Yep.
So, two things that I thought of while Renato was sharing his great advice. Be easy to work with. This is something that I remember when we were at Common Sense Advisory and we did a study on quality, and one of the things that buyers felt got in the way of quality and how they measured quality was actually a big surprise to me, was the vendor's willingness to implement changes, which goes back to this whole point about flexibility. And, you know, I can tell, I don't review the translation test myself now. I have, there's a team of people that do that by language, but in the very first hire that I made at HubSpot, we were testing people, I could tell from the comments the translator made on the test whether we wanted to hire them or not. And the reason was because if their comments were very arrogant and very focused on like, well, I'm going to use this term instead because the Royal Academy says this and like blah, blah, blah. It was all very like disconnected from the end goal of reaching the customer. And it was very much like, well, I'm a specialist in this language and so you better, listen to me. The buyer doesn't really care about that. They don't care about, how you translated that word or that term. They care about if there's an issue, how fast are you going to fix it and how willing are you going to be to fix it and how responsive and easy to work with will you be when there's a problem. That matters a lot. So I would say, focus on customer service as well as sales, sales to get the clients, but to keep them, definitely be easy to work with. And also focus on the customer. And like what impresses me with vendors is when they say, what I see is your customers need this, or, if this might be good for your customer experience. They're thinking about our customers and they're helping us do our job. Like that is a sign of a really great vendor. And I think the more the translator can like put themselves in the shoes of the customer in that language, the better.
Mm-hmm. So here's my final question. Nataly, you have a great new blog. Tell us how we can find that.
Oh, so I have a blog called Born to Be Global. It's at borntobeglobal.com. I actually started it several years ago, but I've just been writing more lately, maybe because of the pandemic and because I love to write. Renato knows that's one of my favorite things to do in life. So I'm trying to share ideas there and things that, hopefully will help people in this industry. So if anyone wants to check it out, you can go there. And I tend to share most of the posts on Twitter and LinkedIn as well. If you want to connect with me there.
I will tell you, I read every one of that. It's really wonderful.
Thank
and
you.
Renato, I know your company. Renato, I know your company also publishes a lot of great learnings and tips. How do we find your latest?
Look, I just go to nimdzi.com or follow us on any social media. We publish a lot. We have a Miss alumnus, Nika Laverdi, who is in charge of our marketing, and she does a great job sharing all of our content. And I would say 80% of our content is free, so enjoy it. And personally, I have a new blog, a new podcast with Michael Stevens. It's called theglobalpodcast.com. Follow us there. We're starting to have very interesting interviews. We used to do together Globally Speaking Radio, and now it's the same crew at the Global Podcast.
Well, I want to thank you both very much. This was such a rich discussion. Regardless of your role in the industry, be it you're a student, your faculty, you're on the supplier side or the buyer side, I think everybody took away some very insightful learnings. Thank you so much for your time, and hope we can do this again. Thank you.
Thank you, Winnie. Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Organization. This was great. Thank you, Kara.
Thank you so much. This was amazing. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to stop the recording as well.